Hello, Amanda. Welcome to the Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico podcast. I never do that. I did that today. I don't know why I'm doing it today, but hi.
Hello, good morning.
I know it is morning. I love when people agree to do morning interviews because I feel like I'm most awake in the morning. By the afternoon, I'm like either smoking weed or I'm like passed out from reading or something.
I feel you. I've got my cup of coffee. It's a beautiful day. I'm like, this is a perfect way to kind of get things rolling for me. So thank you for having me on today.
My pleasure entirely. I want to talk to you about um, trash and glamour and going to Japan and all that, but I want to go all the way back here to start things off. Like you're in New York, right?
hmm Yep, we're
Like,
New York based.
did you grow up right in New York City or
So I'm from Long Island. I'm from Long Island, but all through school and everything, we went into the city all the time. So I'm very familiar with it. Go there constantly. We play there all the time. But we're Long Island based, and we all started out of Hofstra University. So that's the kind of
Hofstra?
uh, pinpoint of where everything started was at school.
So, where in Long Island are you?
I grew up on the South Shore, so I've hopped around a bit, but always Long Island. But I grew up on the South Shore in Massapequa Park.
Massapequa Park. I used to I was living in Wantagh for a
Okay.
year when I was running this punk label called Giant Records, and we were in Rockville Center. And that was a really weird label to work. Well, it was a great label, but it was a weird place because I usually worked in LA or New York, but these guys were out in Long Island. And so I used to get on for 1 year. I tried. I didn't really like Wantagh very much. It was Seaford, actually, Seaford, which is, I guess, next to Long. But I used to go to Mulcahy's,
Okay.
was
Yep.
where the LIRR was.
Yeah. We've played there. We know Mulcahy's.
So if I had a bad day at the office, I'd go right to the bar, right when I got the train. So I
That
do
is
know.
what's convenient. I'm trying to hear like the train announcement because as you're saying the towns, I'm like, yeah, it's like Quanta, Seaford. They just announce it, so I'm trying to hear it in my head because it's impossible to erase that from your brain if you've
more
written
more
the LIRR so many times.
Yeah, more Long Island talk. I was working for this other company called Third Stone, and my boss knew the Baldwins. And one day he asked me if I wanted to go out to lunch with him and Billy Baldwin. And then Billy Baldwin told me he went to Massapequa High School, and his father was the principal. All the Baldwins went there. So I know a little
Oh
about
yeah.
Long Island.
That's
Taylor
us.
Dane, Debbie
Billy
Gibson,
Joel.
Billy Joel. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you grew up out in Long Island. Have you pretty much lived there your whole life?
Yeah. I can't seem to not that I want to, but I've always hopped around to just various parts of Long Island. I've spent time elsewhere, but mostly here. I love it here.
Okay, one more. I had a girlfriend from Great Neck. Okay, I'm trying to get all the Long Island stuff out.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me when you were young and you were growing up? Because I know your father is in the band, and we're going to definitely get to the family dynamic of this band because it's fascinating. But before we get to that, tell me about your upbringing and when you actually started listening to music, and what are your early recollections of the music that you heard when you were young?
Yeah. Well, music is a very important part of my family in general. So my dad was in a band when I was born, and he's actually wearing the t-shirt from that band in the latest video that we just released. So if you see him in a Pipe Dream shirt, that was his band when I was a kid. And I came home from the hospital in a onesie that they had made for me with Pipe Dreams on it of his band. So that was my
Nice.
introduction, was right out the, oh, welcome to the world. You're in a band shirt. And it was the family band shirt. So I was always around music, and growing up when I was a kid, I, I was I remember being in like a club or something, being like allowed to watch him play. And I don't know if you would be able to do that now with all the restrictions and stuff. Like this is a
Mm.
while ago, but like I remember being that, and like in the earlier portion being like, yeah, you want to go see dad? Yeah, I do. So we'd be in the club watching them play on stage, and like I'd have to go home. It was my bedtime, but I remember being a kid, being out, seeing it, and being like, this is really cool. And then I dabbled with playing instruments when I was younger. Because my dad posts this picture every so often of him when he's like 3 years old with two brushes on a drum and his two uncles on each side of him playing instruments and kind of jamming in the basement. And that's what he remembers. So he came out the gate being handed, hey, here's some drumsticks, just try it out. And it stuck. So it's been like a generational, like, oh, we got a new member of the band. What do we need? What are we missing? Hey, you want to try this? And his father played guitar. My grandma was a big band singer. We still have her recordings with like the big band that my dad played drums in when he was like a teenager, you know. Um, so it was just always part of it. And my parents heard me singing when I was 3, my movie, because as a kid you always have like that one movie that you watch 800 times.
Yeah.
My movie was The Little Mermaid. That was the first one that I saw in theaters, and I would be singing like ah, like mimicking Ariel. And my dad noticed, like, she's on key. Okay, so she's 3, but she's singing the right notes. And my aunt, his sister, who was a professional oboe player, she played in orchestras, she taught oboe, she played with the Navy band. Um, she was like, her pitch is good, so hone that. So they were very supportive of like, I just showed that I had some interest, and they're like, let's see what happens with this. So from really young, I had a lot of a
Hmm.
lot of people like,
Sounds
let's,
it.
and my dad's band, there was a member of that group who was in community theater, and she did children's theater. So they would bring me to that on the weekends, and I was so fascinated with that. And that was something musically that I would sing. So I tried to play piano, I tried violin, that didn't really take, because I would start playing by ear and I would get in trouble for not reading the sheet music. And I was like, no, but I'm playing the right song. And they'd be like, yes, but all this technique. And I still struggle with that. But if I hear something, or if I can like write something that I have in like muscle memory, like it lives in me. Like that's how I've always been. So singing is really what I always gravitated
Right.
to. Um, and it started with theater. And my dad would play in the pit when I was in like high school and stuff, in the theater pit. And I would be on the stage doing my like high school production or whatever, because it just always worked that he worked with that theater group with that singer, Gene McCormick. I didn't start playing in bands until really when I played with my dad in this. So it is a very long story. I don't know how much into the tulips you want me to get with it.
Well, first I was trying to figure out if the band, what kind of music the band Pipe Dream played. And I'm guessing that they were a hard rock band, and they played like, I don't know, Deep Purple. And I'm just guessing what
they
kind of it.
they were rock. They were rock. I wouldn't say they were like on the harder side. They were very much like melodic rock, but they could have some like, the most important thing to my dad then and now forever is, does it groove? So it was rock that you could still kind of like dance to, you know?
Yeah.
So that really at its core, like we're definitely a little bit more punky punchy.
Yeah.
But we remind him, he always says of a band he was in before Pipe Dreams called the Peter Chelsea Band. And that's like a New York City punk band that when we started playing, he was like, ooh, oh, I feel like I'm back in the 80s with them, you know? So he's got a long history of like disco bands, party bands, punk bands, heavier bands. Like he loves the drums. And if he finds the groove and the beat in it, he will latch on. And that's what it is for him, you know?
When I first saw your dad's photo or videos or whatever, what I was watching, he reminded me of Simon Kirke. I don't know if you know who that is. He's the drummer of Bad Company and
Okay.
Free, and he kind of resembles him in a way. It was really weird. I was like, is that Simon Kirke on drums? So you answered one of my questions. I was going to ask you if you were in another band before Bad Mary, but this is your first band?
So technically, we came from an iteration of another group. So David, our guitarist, runs a group at Hofstra University. So that's again like the catalyst for us, that we were all except for my dad originally a part of. And that's still going on. That's whoever the students at the time are at the school. It's called David and the Hendersons. And they
Oh,
do covers and like party songs for the drama department parties. So whether you're like a tech, like theater design, construction, whatever, or a performer, like it's all that group. So you've got a lot of different students together that just happen to play. and every year has a different lineup. So we came from one of those years as the core lineup. So I was part of David and the Hendersons, which our version then morphed into Madam X, because I happened to join in a year where all of the members were all staying local. And that does not usually happen. So after graduation, people will move back home. Someone will go on a tour, like, so it all kind of disperses. But our year, like, we were all pretty much staying in New York for different jobs. And we're like, we really like playing together. Maybe we can kind of do an offshoot and just hit the local, like, bars, clubs, whatever, and just do cover sets just for fun when we want. And we're like, okay. So we came up with a different name, Madam X. And that became Madam X. And we had a different, Mike was on rhythm guitar. We were 5 members. So Mike was on rhythm guitar. Our friend Rory, who we're still really, really good friends with, she was on drums. And our other friend Andrew was on bass. So that was that grouping at that time. My dad was not in the band yet. Flash forward like a handful of months, Rory gets a really great internship opportunity in Florida. So she was like, hey, I'm not going to be around for a little bit, and, talked with us about it. But we're like, that's awesome for you. She went to work for Disney for a bit in their like college programs. We're like, that's great. If you have the opportunity, like, have a blast. So she went there. Andrew was about to hop on a tour and was moving in the city, and it was just travel was too much. And we're like, yeah, like, we're just kind of doing this for fun. But me, Mike, and David were still kind of like, okay, but we kind of want to play. And I was just kind of like, well, I know a guy who plays drums. Let me see if maybe he's interested. And Mike played bass. So he hopped on bass. David took over for just lead guitar. We don't have rhythm guitar anymore. So on our recordings, you might hear some layering, but live, it's just the one guitar.
Mhm.
And my dad hopped in on drums, and we started kind of jamming with covers for a bit. Very quickly started writing originals. And then we're like, okay, what is this now? So that is how I ended up doing bands. I was all really a theater major and musical theater, but I always did the rock musicals. I always wanted to be in like Tommy or American Idiot or like the Rocky Horror Show. Like, that's what I wanted to do. So this, or Hedwig and the Angry Inch, I was lucky enough to do. And that's like a mashup of like, this is a musical, but this is a rock show, and there's a storyline and what is happening right now. And like, that's my perfect art form. So that I still am amazed every day that I am in this wild family rock band that is now touring my dream place. Like, it never, it just, I still can't believe it.
The theater part of it kind of explains the videos, which I'm going to get into later because I've seen so many of your videos. So David Henderson actually was he really a professor?
He still is. And he was my professor. And I joke all the time, because there are some shows where his current students, because we play in the local area, if they're like seniors or whatnot, they're old enough to come. So they'll come to the show sometimes. And like hearing their stories about him in class now versus like when I had him like over 10 years ago now at this point, it's like, oh no, he's still David. Yep. That's,
Wow,
so
it's a
yeah,
great
no.
story. How did you come up with the name Bad Mary? I have to ask that.
Um,
People probably call you Mary all the time, right?
Yeah, but I honestly, I embrace it. I'm just like, thank you for listening, and if it clicks in my head, if I hear Mary, and because I don't think of myself that way, but if I hear Mary enough times, I'll be like, okay, maybe, hi, oh, okay, like, I don't, thank you for listening. That's all. Um, but yeah, so we're in a group chat that like is still going constant all the time. And when we were Madam X, that's when we started writing originals, is really when we were like, we need to change the name. We really need to, if we're starting it now, we need to set a good foundation with it now, change the name, and really figure out who we are. And because Madam X was the name of we based it off a painting. There's a painting called Madam X. So that's where that name was inspired by, but it's so many things. It's different songs are named Madam X. There's already a bunch of bands named Madam X. There's one popular band, I think like a pop band in Europe, that was Madam X. So we were already getting people confused, messaging us like, oh, we love that. So first things first, if you Googled Madam X, you wouldn't see us. You'd see everything else. So we did, I think, what everybody does, and does like that random name band generator thing for a little bit and be like, oh, what 3 random words come up that like, so got some ideas from that, but ultimately, I always think of like strawberry alarm clock. Like, that's the wildest, like three words that go together. I'm like, I don't know if we're that kind of band, but I like where that that thought process is going. And one morning, I'm not an early morning person. Like I do love my like mid-morning cup of coffee, start the day. But David messaged us at like 5:30 or 6 a.m. or something when like I wasn't quite awake yet and was like, "How about Bad Mary?" And Mike like turns over and wakes me up and he's like, what about this?" And I was so grouchy that I was like, "That's dumb. No, leave me alone. I'm going back to bed." And like by the end of the day, when I had like become a human and much more reasonable, I was like, "Bad Mary, Bad Mary." And like we all kind of kept repeating it to ourselves and we're like, that's actually really great. And the things for us where it's quick, it's easy to understand. If you search it out, like there wasn't anything else with it. So we made sure like we got our website, we got all the things kind of set up. So we would be what you found if you searched for us. And David's wife, Sue, I love how she explains it. She's like, you want to be able to shout it across a parking lot and have somebody understand what you're saying. Because we see all the time, there's so many bands that are great bands, and they'll be like, "Thank you for listening. Where?"
Yeah.
And like you can't understand what they're saying, and then their branding isn't anywhere, and it's like I want to find you so badly, but I can't, and then they just vanish into the night, and you don't, So we really tried to be considerate in all those things.
Yeah, a lot of the good
Um,
names were already taken. Queen, Kiss, the
yeah,
Ramones, New York
uh,
Dolls, you know?
yep,
Before I talk about
Blondie. That
yeah,
wouldn't fit, but
that's
like
a really good one. Yeah, I know without even asking that you're a Debbie Harry fan, but we'll
I
talk
love
about
her.
that. I was gonna ask, actually, I'll ask you that now. Were there musical influences that you had when you started writing? Were you thinking about bands that you liked or records that you liked that influenced you?
Um, it's funny when we started writing, I really needed to listen to myself sing a lot, if that makes any sense. Cause I grew up really like listening to cast recordings or listening to like, okay, we're going to cover that. So I kind of want to sound like that intonation a little bit or sound like that singer. And when you start doing original music, it's like, okay, well, what do I sound like when I'm not trying to mimic something or when I'm not trying to sound like someone? And it was kind of taking the pieces of those people that I listened to and then trying to weave them into like, okay,
Interesting.
what's my voice? So definitely the question started with Debbie Harry, definitely Debbie Harry, because her voice is so interesting to me because she's sometimes speak singy and sometimes very lilting and sometimes very in the distance, but then sometimes very in your face. So her levels are so cool to me, and she never hides her accent, which I think is also awesome. Like she's very much her voice. Um so her I love the Go-Go's, I love the Bangles because of their harmonies in their rock and roll, honestly, which I think also like I love like the Beach Boys and stuff like that with the harmonies in the rock and roll, but that translates very much into punk. So then Beach Boys, Ramones are really like you take that um uh, you take that aesthetic and it's like okay, but punch it, and that's what I love because it's the musicality but the energy combined. um but I grew up listening to like my dad's stuff too, like the Beatles. Just the songs seem simple, but then you try to play them and realize how
Mm,
complicated they
yeah,
really are, and that's the beauty of
yeah.
the seemingly simple. It's just really it, I like everything. But musical theater, going back, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, I always need to shout to John Cameron Mitchell and especially Stephen Trask. I because he actually follows our Instagram. I went to see a show he put up a
Wow.
couple years back, and like he's one of my musical composition idols. So the fact that like I can kind of message him, he's got a lot larger following than us, so he may or may not respond. And I appreciate whenever and if ever you see our posts, thank you. But always that because they are what took my favorite rock theater piece, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and made it a thing. So for me, that energy, I try to hang on to what energy it gave me and then run with that like a bolt of lightning. So that's my soup. I'm leaving a lot of things out.
Oh, you're doing a great job, I think. This family dynamic that I was talking about, Bill, the drummer, is your father. Mike, bass player, is your husband. Have you guys been married for a long time?
It'll be so we got married in 2016.
The band was already together.
The band was together. We were not together when we started playing music together in general, but we've been together, I think, since Bad Mary. So
Wow.
about 2010 is when we first, like, that's when Mike and I, like, started, quote unquote, but we've been married since 2016.
And David's the professor.
Yes, which Mike never had David in class. So Mike was like drama department adjacent. So Mike's relationship with David was like, he knew him as a professor, but not as his professor. So seeing him interact with David, the other students would be like, oh, David's going to grade me, blah, blah, blah. But Mike did not have that pressure on him in class. So he was always like, they've been like, it was always funny to watch Mike and David interact as students because they never had class together. So it was just like Mike didn't care. He would be like, oh, screw you, David. But, so.
I've always loved bands that have siblings and family members in the band. And I was just wondering, I don't, I'm sure everyone gets in, has disagreements or whatever, but what's it been like for your band to exist in this kind of rock and roll environment as a family? Because there's bound to be something that comes up every now. I mean, you've been around for a while now. I mean, the first record came out in 2013, so it's not like you just formed and it's the same lineup. So how have you been able to, survive in that environment?
I honestly don't know how I would be able to survive in it if it wasn't my family. Like, I do think about that often, and I don't take our lineup for granted because it's not unusual to me, but it is unusual when I see like a lot of how other bands are formed or whatnot. And I think it's so I take it as something that I'm very lucky to have an experience because I get to share it with them. If I were to go on the road right now for a couple weeks and have to like leave my home and kind of separate myself from the people that I care about while I do this thing that I love doing, it would be bittersweet. It would be kind of like hard for me to leave. But because everyone's coming with me, it's this really awesome thing that like we get to share together. So for me, it's really helped bind us because like, hey, we're going to be at practice on
Yeah.
Tuesday. Cause if you're not, like, I know where you live and I'll come get you. And like, what are you doing? So
Yeah.
it, it does help. And I absolutely get what you're saying about how it can maybe cause like tensions sometimes, but that's, instead of fighting about like politics or fighting about other disagreements, we might argue about like, okay, well, I really like that fill over there. Well, I don't want to play that fill there because so like
Right.
it just changes the dynamic or changes the focus a little bit. But for me, it's the only way. I think I feel very, very lucky that this is how it's set up. And I joke all the time, like, we don't really go on family vacation. We'll go on like a tour.
I mean, I like the music, and that's, of course, it's what drew me the music, and I knew about the band. But when I heard it was a father and a daughter, I was like, wow, you don't hear about that very often. That is not a common thing. But I see how it works. Um, so you said, I think, a few minutes ago, because I was going to ask you that the band started around 2010 as Bad Mary, and the first record came out full length was Better Days in 2013. Is that correct? Is that pretty much the
I think I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I think at one of our last Madam X shows, which may have been in 2011, late summer, like almost 2012, I think that's when we played Hangover for the first time. So on Better Days, Hangover is the first track on that. That's
Mhm.
the first original we ever did. And actually it used to have an entire additional verse that it no longer has on the on the album. Because we're like, this song's too long. Why is it over 3 minutes? We got to cut a whole thing out. Like, that's very much our like, why is this song this long? We just got to cut something out. Let's 1, 2, 3, go. But I think that was at a Madam X show. So we may have officially become Bad Mary more in 2012. Mike's the timeline guy. He remembers everything like the years, like, okay, this video came out in this year. So that's when we did this. And it was exactly this day. Like, that's his superpower. I'm kind of like, well, I remember it was around this, and then a couple minutes later I'll contradict myself. So I think I'm going on record now as saying I think 2012. I'll ask Mike.
I'm assuming this, but I don't know for sure. Mike writes the music and you write the lyrics, or is the whole band involved in the songwriting process?
The whole band is involved in the songwriting process, though there are like two main pathways that a song will come about. There are some that don't fit those two molds. Um So Mike or David will usually come in with like the bones of a song. They'll be like, here's my arrangement, or here's my intended like structure where I want it to go. Mike may have like a vocal line and like lyrics around that I'll go in and be like, okay, well, that doesn't fit rhythmically, or like that syllable's really hard to put with that. And that, so I'll go in and try to fix the technicality of how the words are maybe structured a bit.
So they
Um,
actually come with lyrics too, some of their songs?
sometimes it'll be like, here's a verse, but we need a second verse, and I want to do a bridge, but I don't know what the bridge should be at all. So you do the bridge, whatever you feel like should. So there's some songs where like I will not be given a bridge except for the arrangement, and I'll have to come up with like either a note that David will be like, I just want some kind of ethereal note floating in, so put something in there, or hey, I don't have lyrics, I don't have this, but we need a bridge, so please take care of it. So like I will come in and kind of either do the whole thing or mostly sections, because they'll have an idea of like, this song's about this, but I don't have this part. Or I wrote it, but I didn't phrase it the way that it should be said. So I'll kind of edit and make it, because I'm ultimately the one that has to sing it. So they'll
Right.
give it to me and be like, whatever you feel like would be from you, change whatever you want. And like, I'll put it to them before I make it final. I'll be like, does this work with what your idea was? And we'll go back and forth and kind of until it's final. Mike will have vocal melodies because he does vocals also. So like some of the
Yes.
backing tracks you hear. So
Mhm.
we'll work on those together. And sometimes I'll be like, that doesn't fit at all with what I hear, or like that's a really hard jump. So I'll go in again and we'll like tweak stuff. Or if there's parts missing, we'll play around with it to see how I can tie pieces together to make it all cohesive. David will do a very similar thing and have the instrument, but he'll have like a rhythm. So he'll give me lyrics and be like, it should be ba 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 da 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 da, and like I'll have to take that and try to fit with his syncopation that he wants, but
Mhm.
then I'll put a vocal line over it. So he doesn't really write the melodies or anything. He's more rhythm. So he'll like, well, he does not like singing. He will not sing on on mic or anything. Is not that. So that's usually left up to me. Um, and then there are random ones like Trouble. My dad started jamming with his bass because he plays bass too. So like me and Mike were over at my dad's house in his basement, and that's when that started. So like there are a couple that don't fit those molds at all. And like Trouble specifically, I wrote all the lyrics for that one on the way to the recording studio before we recorded it. So there are some that like just happen. Um, but yeah, by the time it gets to me, it's like, okay, they'll have the arrangement figured out, and then I'll have to put the ribbon on it
That's
on
great.
top. Yeah.
So it's a team effort. And I noticed, and I mean, I'm going a lot of my info I've got from Bandcamp. So if I'm wrong, just correct me. Um, Dave records most of the stuff or
Yeah.
all of it.
Um, past a certain point, yes. So we do have some recordings out there that we did work with um different producers or audio engineers that we're still great friends with. We just the DIY approach really works for us because we have a
Yeah,
little bit more
I love that.
control of the timeline and just the space and really freedom with it. And since we now have like the studio set up in David's house, it's like whenever we can make something, it's there,
It's
instead of
working.
like,
It's definitely working because sonically you guys sound great. So he's obviously a good engineer. So
thank
that's
you.
fantastic.
He would love
I-
to hear that. So like, because it's been we've all been learning as we're going. So like if you hear Better Days, like that was the first we did that all DIY, to Trash and Glamour that just came out. David did everything on both. So to hear kind of his journey with how he's learned how to produce and mix our sound has been very fun. And
Has it been digital all along, or do you ever use tape at all?
it's been digital. Although we no, it's been digital. We would love to. My dad would love to do
Yeah,
tape at some point.
I'm a 2 inch machine guy. I love those things. The drums. All drummers all want to record on 2 inch because it
Oh
sounds
yeah.
so much great. Okay, I can't go through every single record, but Killing Dinosaurs, We Could Have Saved the World, Glitter Bomb, those all came out as EPs. One song that I really like that you guys had on Glitter Bomb is Motor Mouth. That one
Ah,
caught my attention. I really like it. What's the story behind that song? I have to ask.
so Glitter Bomb also, that was the last release that we did with another studio. So since Glitter Bomb, we've been entirely DIY. And then the first two you mentioned were Matt Storm. We worked with him at Studio G. So
Oh,
those
nice.
three, um, were great experiences for us. But Motor Mouth and the video for it that goes with it kind of explains the concept a little bit. And it's really about volatility on the internet or internet trolls. Because if you're an artist of any kind, especially in these days, like you're almost required to be on social media. So you're on all these platforms and you're getting all these messages. But even that, if you're not on those platforms, you're inundated by stuff all the time, or people are texting you stuff all the time, like, oh, I don't believe that about that person. It's like gossip and all this
You're a
toxicity that,
target.
yeah. You know, even if you're not a target, you're still a target. Someone out there is going to say something that you're going to see that's like, oh, really? Yeah. You know, so it's about kind of living in the world with that. So that's, I've had enough of your motor mouth and I'm sick of all your, I don't know if I can curse on this podcast, so I'm not going
You
to say
can
that word.
curse. Please curse.
Yeah,
Please.
but I've had enough of your motor mouth and I'm sick of all this shit. And it's just, the video is David loves a green screen. So he put that up and it's me kind of singing to all these comments flying by of just like the bullshit you see online every day. And it just ends
It's
with
horrible.
shut the fuck up. You know, it's like, that's not the real world. That's just, it just flies around and you got to deal with it. And it's very easy to be negative behind a keyboard, but you don't have to believe it.
Yeah, the internet, the best thing that ever happened, the worst thing that ever happened. That's what I would
Exactly.
say.
Well,
So
because it does
we're
do a lot of good, but
yeah,
you gotta look out for those parts.
yeah. So were you targeted at all? Did you use is that a generalized song or were you ever targeted on the internet?
It's
Like I know
it
you guys are on Twitch a lot.
Yeah.
All good?
It's mostly good. I mean, you do get we have a lot of direct messaging, you know, between people that are either new followers or whatnot. And I I am on some of them. We all handle it, but people will like assume that it's me. So there have been occasions where like some guy will kind of start getting weird in the direct messages, but it was either like Mike or David that was handling it that day. So it's kind of like, hi, this is David. And then they'll be like, oh, this is, you know, like they'll get mad about it. And it's like, we're a band account at any given time. Like it's any of us. And we'll tell you
Yeah.
who you're talking to, but like it, it is interesting to see what comes through the messages and even the bots that come through or like the random, like it's the Wild West. That's what it is.
Certainly is.
I've been sent some inappropriate pictures, so I think it's inescapable. So sorry to all the women on the internet getting those pics in their TMs. I'm with you. We will prevail. But
Around 2019, when you put out The Return of Space Girl, which is described as a 33-minute punk rock space opera with film, it seems like you guys all of a sudden started to go to another level because I was paying attention to the music and that record really, and it led to you guys going to Japan. Talk about putting that record together, the concept, and how it ended up that you went to Japan. Because that, and I know you're going back, but the first time must have been incredible.
it was uh, it was absolutely wild. So that the Return of Space Girl was our first real big foray back into like, we're gonna do something totally different that still sounds like us, that brings that theater storyline element in, because when we do, occasionally we will do just Return of Space Girl shows where we just play the album. So those are fun for me because we'll put the animated film up on the wall behind us, so the cartoon's going while we're playing through it.
That's cool.
And it's very fun to be able to get like over theatrical with this like very rock music. But that was really a big project for us to just explore what we could do. And it's not necessarily a set through story, but it all ties together. It all makes sense as a cohesive picture. So recording that was great. That was our first time too in the home studio, so we could really take our time with stuff. Like there's one song, Curtain Call, I think I recorded like in 9 different sessions because I kept like rage quitting the vocal because it was so fast. And I was like, why do we do this so fast? Like eventually, like I figured out the breathing and I figured out all that, but I had the time to do it. And it was just so much more freeing to have that freedom with it than being like, okay, we got 6 hours in a studio this one day, we got to get these 3 tracks done. What we get is what we get, you know? So that for me, that process was great. The videos that came out of it, because there are some, like The Itch has its own music video. but the animation we didn't know about at first. So that was a surprise. David went on sabbatical for a bit and he was teaching himself animation, and we didn't know that also. But we knew he was going to be doing something. And one day we get to practice, and he's been working on the video, and he's like, I want to show you guys something. So we go down into the studio, and he shows us the opening of the Return of Space Scroll, the animation, and the first song ends, and we're like, wow, this is really, really cool. And then the second song starts, and the video is still going.
Wow.
So we all kind of stepped back, and we were like, David, what the hell are you making? He's like, I'm doing the whole thing. I'm doing
Wow.
the whole thing.
That must have been
So
mind blowing.
it is wild. It took a lot of time, because figure that's like one man doing all of the
Yeah.
animation on pretty much like an iPad setup that he taught himself how to do. So when I say like we're very lucky to have David, like he just
Some
of his own
talented people
volition
in
was
your
like, yeah, I'm
band.
gonna learn how to animate. But he uses it in the drama department now a lot. So he went on sabbatical to kind of learn a new skill and produce something. It won a whole bunch of, like, he submitted it to a whole bunch of film festivals and like internationally, which is wild. It won best music at a handful of them, which was great for us because that's the part that we were like, yeah, we did that part. Okay, cool. But like he won a bunch of awards with it, and like it's just absolutely wild. Cut to the second part of your question, because there's a bunch. I will talk to you for 5 hours. But how we ended up in Japan. So the film was doing its own kind of circuit. And the timeline, I'm jumping back and forth a little bit. So it's a little bit of a soup, but we were already playing. I don't think the album had come out before we went to Japan, but we were already working on the album while the Japan opportunity happened. So the plan was to go to Japan with some tracks from it.
Mhm.
So we were actually in going back to Disney World. My mom worked for Disney. So we were visiting her in Florida. Mike and I were literally in the Magic Kingdom, the most magical place on earth. I think I was in the restroom. Mike was waiting on like a bench outside and was looking at our plays for the week, because we'll track all our plays where we're getting played or whatnot. And he saw like, oh shit, we're getting played in Japan. Like somebody's playing us on like Tokyo, like FM terrestrial radio. What? So we're in the Magic Kingdom seeing this. Like that's how I always remember like fireworks going off and whatnot. And like at the same time we were getting played and are still getting played by Rodney Bingenheimer on Sirius XM
Yeah.
on the Underground
Rodney on the
Garage.
Rock.
Rodney on the Rock, yeah. We love Rodney, and we were trying to connect the dots on how Mike Rogers
I know
is,
Mike.
yeah.
Yeah, he's a
So
good guy.
I think he must have either heard us on
Yeah.
Rodney's show, because they had worked together at K Rock at some point before that. So we were like, okay, that may be how he found us. But Japan has always been a bucket list place for us to go. Like on our previous EP, we released a song, Japan, before any of, I keep hitting this, before any of this was even like in the cards. So when we saw like, okay, we're getting played there, this is happening, who do we reach out to? So we reached out to Mike Rogers, and we're just like, hey, thank you so much. We would love to come over there someday. Do you have any advice, or would you suggest? And he got back to us and gave us a couple of contacts, and we're like, you can try these people, see if maybe you can set something up. We got a great response from one of them. We still work with her as well. We're working with her on this tour, but April, and thank you, April. And she helped us set everything up, and
That's
then one
great.
thing led to another, and we went over and had a really great reception, which was wild to be somewhere completely different, having people sing your lyrics back at you. But also our first show there were two guys in the back that were from Belmore. So we're playing and we hear, yes,
Belmore,
Strong
Long
Island.
Island.
And we're like, are you kidding us? Are you like, we go all the way to Tokyo, and there's two guys in the back that were like, yeah, no, we went to, I think they had a friend that like studied in America, and then they were like visiting it. So it just happened to be at the same time. We're like, no matter where you
That's
go.
great. That's fantastic.
So excited to be going back, especially with the new EP. I still need to pack.
This doesn't have to be a long answer, but I'm assuming we're looking at the break here that the pandemic kind of threw you guys off your game for a little while.
Yeah. The plan was to go back in 2020 with the released Return of Space Girl and maybe some new tracks, and really like we had a monthly like show at our home place. Mr. Beery's on Long Island is we it's like the CBGB of Long Island. Like we all have they embraced it as the spot for like original punk rock, all this. They are a home to so many of us on Long Island. Thank goodness they made it through the pandemic. We really supported that place. But we had a monthly show that just started, and our first show, like the place was packed. So we were like, that was February of 2020.
Oh,
And we had a show March 15th, no, March 13th,
that didn't
2020.
happen, did it?
That no, but it was that morning that they were still cutting the so it was like, okay, 100 people is okay. And we're like, okay, we might be bordering, because I think the show previous had like a little bit over that, and it's not a huge inside, but people go outside and stuff. And then they cut it to like 75, and we were like, I don't know. And then they cut it, and it was that day we were watching, and then we canceled that show. And we are like, okay, maybe next month. So we had really just we were on the up
I
of we
know
had
the
so many
timing is
things.
bad, right? That was bad timing for you guys because I can tell that Space Girl was about ready to like, and then this happens. Well, at least you came back.
Yeah.
You, I
We
have
we
to
embraced
talk.
streaming. That really helped us get through.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that
kept
was
the
a good
gears
thing for
turning.
bands. Yeah. Now I got to talk to you about these two classic. I don't know. I have to say, why volume 6 and volume 7? What happened to the first 5 volumes? But I'm
Well,
assuming it's a joke that you.
for us, it is a joke, but for us, those were our 6th and 7th releases too. So we just kind of were
Oh,
like, we couldn't,
duh.
because we had Better Days than Killing Dinosaurs. It was Better Days, Killing Dinosaurs. We Could Have Saved the World, Glitter Bomb, Space Girl.
It
So when
is.
we couldn't record and we couldn't get together, we weren't writing new stuff. But when we were allowed to get back together, finally after being separated, we were like, let's have some fun with some covers and just get back into the studio and get it going again while
You
we get
guys
the
are good at
juices working.
covers. You guys are really good
You're
at
so
covers.
fun.
The best, I mean, I don't think I've ever heard a woman do Tie Your Mother Down. So that was fantastic. But what really got me was White Rabbit and Don't You Want Me back to back. I mean, I was telling people about, I'm like, they have Jefferson Airplane and the Human League back to back. I mean, how cool is that? I mean,
Thank you.
I
Oh, we
don't
had
know whose
fun.
sequence that was. The other thing I liked was your Christmas Silent Night was one of the best covers I've ever heard of a Christmas song. I just wanted to point that out. So
Thank
finally, here
you.
we are, Trash and Glamour. All right. I'm going to use Mike's quote here and just read it to you because I thought it was really good. Trash and Glamour is a small celebration of everything we've done. We've got some straight up blistery punky tunes like Are You With the Band, which is a great video for, and Light It Up, but also fun and weird songs that really embrace our personality, like The Floor is Lava, which has another great video. I really personally love Vibe-A-Side, and there's no way I can do this podcast without that being one of the songs I'm going to play because that song is like great. I love it. But Mike's quote is really good. I mean, that's pretty much a summary of the record, right?
Yeah, I think so. I do think so. It was a fun record to make, and it, this one we would write a song and then record it, and then write another song and then record it. So it was this collection
Singles,
that,
yeah, singles.
yeah, we didn't like Space Girl was a piece that we kind of wrote.
Wasn't that an
And
older song originally that you redid? Yeah.
yeah, that was on Better Day. So Space Girl was a song that Mike tells this story, and I'll give you the short version because it's really his. But he was playing around on a keyboard that he had before our band was ever even a thing. So his idea for Space Girl on that song was way before even he was in our group, and that was something that he brought to the table as like I had this idea brewing for a long time. So that was on Better Days. That was on the first album we put out, and that idea kind of kept kicking around. So then we re-recorded it for the full length.
Yeah. Well, it works. It works. I've noticed that The Floor is Lava has over 74,000 views on YouTube. I was just looking at that this morning. So it seems to me that you're right there now. Do you feel that way too? Like you're right on the cusp here?
It I don't I just gonna keep my fingers crossed and go with where the flow is going, because it's been a wild ride. It has been a wild ride. And anytime some new hurdle, or anytime we pass some new hurdle, I just am thankful, because like uh, whenever I get discouraged about things, also because like it's very easy to go back into like the comment section and like all that and see all those things and be like, okay, well, I should be here by now, or I should be this. If I were to tell me at 17 years old what me now is doing, that's very grounding for me, you know? So I'm just very appreciative of like where I am on the way to where I'm going. So I hope it's all systems go up and up. And keeping my fingers crossed. But we keep meeting amazing people. We keep just kind of trying to go with our gut and do the best we can.
Is it a team effort as far as the videos go too? Because you guys have great videos. I mean, how do you come up with your ideas? You have directors you work with, or do you do everything
David,
yourself? David, huh?
David. So like
He's a genius.
yeah, the video for It's All Trash, that's a local spot that we had a friend of ours guided us through. Like if we didn't have Crispy Dorado on Instagram, she's another vocalist. She's incredible. But she's very familiar with that location. So she kind of guided us through, and then David filmed that whole thing. Um and edits all of those. So he animates.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's all David.
You guys have a winning formula with your band for sure. I feel like you're there. You're right there. Now you're going back to Japan, what, in a couple weeks, right?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. How
Tomorrow.
did I get this interview with you the day before? I got to tell Dana Gordon I love her, because I didn't even realize that.
We
Dana's a
love
very
her
good
too.
publicist, by the way. I had Kelly Dollyrod, Kelly Ogden on the show not too long ago. And she works with Dana also. So Dana's got it going on. As a matter of fact, I noticed that you guys are doing a show with the Dollyrods in September.
Yeah, it's our second time playing with them. We're just very psyched that they're coming to town again and we get to see them. They were so awesome the last time. Not only
Good
awesome with
people.
their show, but just awesome people. Yeah. Their whole family. And that's another, we really like their dynamic, because
Families.
it's, yeah,
The
it's a
family values tour. Well, that's been used already, but you could come up with something like that, because it's true, because they bring their kids with them on tour now. So
yeah, and they're
I've been
great too.
yeah, I've been following that band for like 20 years. So they've been doing it for a while. Um, so you're packed and you're ready to go.
Getting there, getting there. My dad and I are doing a FaceTime later to do the final checklist to make sure we didn't didn't forget anything. I'm like, just bring your passport. If you have that, we're good.
Six shows in Japan. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we're going to Chiba this time, which we didn't get to the last time we were there. So it's gonna be a cool little excursion for a day.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time the day before you're leaving. I didn't realize that, to go to an international tour to come and talk to us. And I wish you guys the best. I mean, it's obvious to me that you've worked really hard and you're getting to a point now where it's like things are really coming together. Probably would have happened if the pandemic didn't happen sooner, but at
Yeah.
least it's happening, right?
Yeah. We kept it going as best we could, and we're just happy to be here now. Um, but yeah, I can't getting on a plane. Getting on a plane very soon. Oh my goodness.
Well, go finish packing, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
All
Thank
righty.
you. Can I shout out just
Yes.
quickly, if anybody has no idea who we are, you can find us on all our socials at Bad Mary Band. If you're not New York local, if we're not playing near you, we stream every week on Twitch. So you can find us at Bad Mary Band on twitch.tv. Come say hi. The messaging, it's all us. If you message us, it's us. We respond. We love making new friends. Like today, Steve, you're wonderful. I'm really glad I got to meet you. I'm glad I got to talk to you. Your art is awesome.
Thank you. I was going to say, so aren't you, Mary, but I mean
Thank
Amanda.
you.
All right. Thank you.